the monument of failure. The stellar gate hung in space like a silent god, orbiting a dead star at the edge of Alliance territory. The structure dwarfed everything around it. It was a perfect ring nearly 300 kilometers wide, forged from a black metal that no scientist had ever managed to identify. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light that had endured for millions of years. For 5 centuries, the greatest minds in the galaxy had come to study it. For 5 centuries, they had failed. Inside the primary observation chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered beneath massive holographic displays showing the gate in all its impossible detail. Scholars, military commanders, diplomats, and engineers filled the seats. At the center platform stood Queen Lysura, ruler of the Galactic Alliance. "The Stellar Gate remains the greatest mystery ever discovered," she announced. Her voice echoed throughout the chamber. 1,012 specialists have attempted to unlock its purpose. None have succeeded. A massive screen displayed images of previous attempts. Brilliant scientists had tried decoding its language. Military experts had attempted activation through power transfers. Artificial intelligences had analyzed every visible symbol. Nothing had worked. The gate remained silent. High Scholar Vector stepped forward. The tall, silver-skinned alien was considered the foremost expert on ancient civilizations. "After decades of research," he declared confidently, "my team believes we are finally prepared for a successful activation sequence." The audience responded with polite applause. Many had heard similar promises before. Among the technicians standing near the back wall was Ethan Carter. Unlike the prestigious figures filling the chamber, Ethan wore a simple maintenance uniform. His job wasn't to study the gate. He repaired equipment, inspected systems, and ensured the research station continued functioning. Most of the assembled leaders barely noticed he existed. Ethan preferred it that way. As Vector continued presenting his theories, Ethan found himself staring at the holographic image of the gate. Something bothered him. For months, he had worked around the station's sensor systems. Whenever he finished repairs, he often spent time reviewing archived scans of the ancient structure. The patterns didn't make sense, at least not in the way everyone assumed. The presentation ended. Researchers moved toward the command consoles, overlooking the rail gate outside the station windows. Another activation attempt was about to begin. "Initiate sequence," Vector ordered. Energy surged through massive conduits. Beams of power struck the ancient ring. The symbols along its surface brightened briefly. The entire chamber watched in anticipation. Seconds passed, then minutes. Nothing happened. The blue lights faded. The gate returned to silence. A disappointed murmur spread throughout the room. Another failure. Vector lowered his head. "I don't understand," he muttered. Queen Lysara looked equally frustrated. 500 years of effort. Another dead end. As officials began discussing the failure, Ethan continued studying the holographic display. His eyes followed the arrangement of symbols circling the ring. Then a realization struck him. He blinked, looked again, and suddenly saw something nobody else seemed to notice. The symbols weren't arranged like commands. They were arranged like connections, pathways, relationships, a map. His heart began beating faster. For centuries, every expert had approached the gate as if it were a machine waiting for instructions. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if it wasn't waiting to be controlled? Before he could stop himself, Ethan stepped forward. "Excuse me." The conversation ceased. Several officials turned toward him with visible annoyance. Vector frowned. "And you are?" "Ethan Carter, Maintenance Division." A few people exchanged amused looks. A maintenance worker interrupting the Alliance's top scientists was almost laughable. Queen Lysara raised an eyebrow. "You have something to say?" Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to stay quiet. Yet the idea refused to leave his mind. "Maybe," he said carefully, "the problem isn't the gate." The room fell silent. Vector crossed his arms. "What exactly does that mean?" Ethan looked toward the towering image of the ancient structure. For the first time, he spoke the thought that had formed in his mind. "I think everyone has been asking the wrong question." The chamber became completely still. Even Queen Lasara leaned forward slightly. Ethan pointed toward the glowing symbols surrounding the gate. You've spent centuries trying to figure out how to activate it. He paused. But what if it isn't waiting to be activated at all? No one spoke. Outside the station windows, the ancient ring drifted silently against the darkness of space, as though listening. And for the first time in 500 years, someone was beginning to wonder if the galaxy's greatest mystery had been misunderstood from the very beginning. The human theory. The silence in the observation chamber lasted only a moment before it was shattered by laughter. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. A maintenance technician challenging 5 centuries of scientific research was absurd to many of the Alliance's finest minds. High Scholar Vector looked particularly irritated. You believe, he said slowly, that over 1,000 experts from dozens of civilizations have misunderstood the Stellar Gate, and you alone have discovered the truth. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beneath the attention of the room. I didn't say I discovered the truth. Then were you saying? Vector demanded. Ethan glanced toward the giant holographic projection of the gate. I'm saying maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. Several scholars rolled their eyes. One of them whispered something to a colleague, causing both to chuckle. Queen Lasara noticed. Enough, she said firmly. The room immediately quieted. Her golden eyes remained fixed on Ethan. You interrupted this meeting because you believe you have a different interpretation. Explain it. Ethan took a deep breath. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even supposed to be in this discussion. But now that he had spoken, there was no turning back. Every report I've read describes the gate as a machine. Vector nodded. Because it is. Maybe, Ethan replied. But every activation attempt has been based on that assumption. He walked toward the holographic display. The scholars watched with growing skepticism. Ethan pointed at the glowing symbols covering the ring. Look at these. We've studied them for centuries, one researcher said. I know. Then what could you possibly add? Ethan ignored the comment. These symbols repeat in patterns. Obviously, but not command patterns. That caught Queen Lasara's attention. What kind of patterns? Ethan enlarged part of the display. Clusters of symbols appeared in the air. When engineers build systems, commands usually flow toward a central function. He traced several pathways. But these don't. The symbols connected outward, branching, linking, joining, almost like roads between cities. The room gradually became quieter. Even Vector began studying the display more carefully. Ethan continued. The symbols aren't arranged like instructions. What are they arranged like? Lasara asked. Relationships. The Queen frowned. Relationships? Connections between separate points. Several researchers exchanged uncertain looks. Ethan could see that some were beginning to follow his reasoning. He pulled up historical activation records. More holograms appeared around the room. Every failed attempt, every test, every experiment. For 500 years, Ethan said, everyone has tried to command the gate. He pointed at another display. Power injections. Another. Encryption sequences. Another. Artificial intelligence interfaces. The images filled the chamber. Every attempt assumes the gate is waiting for someone smart enough to solve it. Nobody interrupted. The question is, Ethan said quietly, what if that's not its purpose? The room fell silent again. Queen Lasara folded her arms. What purpose do you believe it serves? Ethan hesitated. His theory sounded almost ridiculous, but the evidence kept leading him back to the same conclusion. I think it's a test. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs erupted across the chamber. A test. Impossible. Based on what? Ethan pointed at the network-like symbols. These don't represent authority. His finger moved across the glowing pathways. They represent cooperation. That statement caused even more debate. For centuries, the Alliance had assumed the ancient builders created the gate as a repository of knowledge or a transportation device. No one had seriously considered another possibility. Vector finally spoke. And if you're wrong? Ethan met his gaze. Then nothing changes. The scholar frowned. And if you're right? Ethan looked toward the immense structure floating beyond the station. Then we've spent 500 years trying to force open a door that was never locked. The room became still. Queen Lysara stared thoughtfully at the gate. Finally, she rose from her chair. "What do you need?" Every head turned toward her. Vector looked shocked. "Your Majesty." She raised a hand. Let him answer. Ethan swallowed. "I need direct access to the gate." The chamber exploded with protests. "Absolutely not. He's unqualified. This is madness. He's a maintenance worker." Queen Lysara allowed the arguments to continue for several seconds before silencing everyone with a single command. "Enough." The room instantly obeyed. The queen stepped toward the observation window. The stellar gate glowed faintly against the darkness beyond. 500 years. 1,012 failures. No answers. No progress. Nothing. Then she turned toward Ethan. "You will have your access." The room froze. Vector stared in disbelief. "Your Majesty." "For centuries," Lysara interrupted, "we have followed the advice of experts." She looked around the chamber. "And where has it led us?" Nobody answered. Finally, she faced Ethan. "You have one opportunity." Ethan nodded. "I understand." Hours later, escorted by security personnel and senior researchers, Ethan stood inside one of the ancient docking structures attached directly to the gate. The massive black metal towered above him. The air felt strangely still, as if the structure itself were watching. He moved slowly across the ancient surface, ignoring the major control nodes everyone always focused on, looking instead at the smaller symbols hidden between them. Then he found it, a narrow panel nearly invisible beneath centuries of dust and corrosion. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a command interface. It looked more like an invitation. Behind him, dozens of observers watched through drones and sensors, waiting for another failure. Ethan carefully placed his hand against the ancient panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a brilliant blue light erupted beneath his fingers. Across the immense surface of the stellar gate, millions of symbols suddenly ignited. The entire structure began to glow, and for the first time in 500 years, the gate answered. Beyond the door, the moment the stellar gate awakened, chaos erupted across the station. Alarms sounded. Sensors overloaded. Scientists shouted reports from every control console. Outside the observation windows, the ancient ring blazed with brilliant blue light. Energy surged across its surface like rivers of lightning, illuminating the darkness of space for thousands of kilometers. No one moved. No one could. For 500 years, the gate had remained silent. Now it was alive. In the central command chamber, Queen Lysara stared at the enormous displays in disbelief. "Status report," she ordered. A technician struggled to process the incoming data. "Energy levels are increasing, Your Majesty." "How much?" The technician swallowed. "We've never recorded anything like this." The room fell silent. Even High Scholar Vector appeared speechless. Every prediction, every theory, every scientific model, none had anticipated this. At the center of it all stood Ethan Carter, a maintenance worker, the one person who had dared to question centuries of assumptions. Deep within the docking structure, Ethan watched the symbols around him glow brighter. The ancient panel beneath his hand hummed softly. Then the air itself began to shimmer. Blue particles gathered before him. The researchers observing through cameras leaned closer. The particles merged into a single shape. A figure, tall, humanoid, made entirely of light. Gasps echoed through the station. The glowing being opened its eyes. For a moment, it simply observed Ethan. Then it spoke. "Candidate acknowledged." The voice resonated throughout the entire structure. Not loud, yet somehow everyone heard it. Every person aboard the station froze. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" he asked. The being regarded him silently, then answered, "I'm the custodian." Across the station, every recording device captured the moment. Every scientist listened. Every government representative watched. The greatest mystery in galactic history was finally speaking. The holographic figure turned slightly. Its luminous gaze swept across the stars beyond the gate. "For 3 million years," it said, "I have waited." The statement sent shockwaves through the observers. 3 million years. The gate was older than anyone had imagined. Far older. Queen Lysara leaned forward. Waited for what? The custodian looked directly toward one of the monitoring drones, as though it could see everyone watching. Successors. A heavy silence followed. The word carried enormous weight. Not visitors. Not conquerors. Successors. The custodian extended a glowing hand. Immediately, vast holographic images appeared throughout the chamber. Entire galaxies filled the displays. Ancient cities, massive starships, worlds beyond imagination. The civilization that had built the gate. The room watched in stunned silence. They were known as the architects, the custodian explained. They crossed the stars when most galaxies were still young. The images showed wonders beyond anything the Alliance possessed. Technology, so advanced it seemed like magic. They created the stellar gates to identify civilizations capable of inheriting their knowledge. Vector found his voice. And why did they disappear? The custodian remained silent for several seconds, then answered. They chose to leave. The reply only deepened the mystery. But before anyone could ask further questions, another image appeared. Thousands of species, thousands of worlds, connected by glowing pathways. The same patterns Ethan had noticed in the symbols. The test was never technological, the custodian said. It was philosophical. A murmur spread through the command center. The custodian continued. Many civilizations discovered this gate. Images flashed rapidly. Powerful alien empires, ancient kingdoms, advanced machine intelligences. All failed. Each sought control. More images appeared. Attempts to force activation. Attempts to dominate. Attempts to claim ownership. Each believed superiority granted entitlement. The images vanished. Only Ethan remained standing before the glowing figure. Then the custodian pointed directly at him. This candidate sought understanding. Every eye turned toward Ethan. The young engineer looked almost embarrassed. The custodian continued. He did not ask how to command the gate. The holographic figure stepped forward. He asked why it existed. The room fell silent. For the first time, many finally understood. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't technology. It wasn't power. It was perspective. The custodian raised its hand. The center of the massive ring began to glow. A brilliant vortex formed inside the stellar gate. Energy swirled like a miniature galaxy. The portal was opening. Gasps echoed across the station. Beyond the portal lay something incredible. An immense archive. Endless worlds of knowledge. Ancient technology. History stretching back millions of years. The legacy of the architects. Then the custodian spoke again. The archive recognizes the successful candidate. The glowing figure turned toward Ethan. Its luminous eyes brightened. The inheritor has been found. Shock swept through the chamber. Several Alliance representatives immediately exchanged worried looks. Political calculations began forming in their minds. If humanity gained access to the archive alone, the balance of power across the galaxy could change overnight. Queen Lysara noticed their expressions. So did Vector. For the first time, excitement mixed with fear. The portal continued growing. The archive awaited. But a new conflict was already beginning. Because after centuries of failure, one human had succeeded. And now the entire galaxy wanted to know what came next. One human changed everything. The opening of the stellar gate should have been a moment of celebration. Instead, it nearly divided the galaxy. Within hours of the custodian's announcement, emergency meetings were taking place across the Galactic Alliance. Political leaders, military commanders, and corporate powers all wanted the same thing: access to the archive. The knowledge hidden beyond the gate was beyond value. Whoever controlled it could become the most powerful force in history. Inside the Alliance Council chamber, arguments erupted from every direction. The archive belongs to the Alliance. No single species should control it. Humanity activated the gate. They have the strongest claim. The technology is too dangerous. Queen Lysara listened patiently as representatives shouted over one another. At the center of the debate sat Ethan Carter. The maintenance engineer looked completely out of place among rulers and admirals. Yet everyone in the room knew the truth. Without him, none of them would be here. The gate had chosen him. That fact could not be ignored. Finally, Queen Lysara raised her hand. Silence returned. "Ethan Carter," she said, "the custodian identified you as the inheritor. What do you propose?" Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. For a moment, Ethan simply looked around the room. He saw fear, greed, suspicion, the same things that had caused countless conflicts throughout history. Then he thought about the architects, a civilization advanced enough to cross entire galaxies. Surely they had anticipated this moment. Ethan slowly stood. "I don't think the archive belongs to humanity." The statement stunned the chamber. Several human representatives looked horrified. Others looked confused. Queen Lysara narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Ethan nodded. "The gate wasn't activated because I was human." The room remained silent. "It activated because I approached it differently." He looked toward the massive holographic image of the stellar gate. "The entire purpose of this system is cooperation." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The architects weren't searching for the strongest civilization. Ethan paused. They were searching for civilizations capable of working together. The word struck the room harder than any speech from a politician, because everyone knew he was right. The evidence was undeniable. For centuries, species had competed for control, and for centuries they had failed. A human maintenance worker had succeeded only when he stopped trying to dominate the mystery. Suddenly, the chamber doors opened. A glowing blue figure appeared. The custodian. The entire council immediately fell silent. The ancient intelligence looked across the gathered leaders, then spoke. "The candidate's conclusion is correct." The room became still. The archive was never intended for one species. A wave of relief spread through some delegates. Others looked disappointed. The custodian continued. "The final test remains incomplete." Queen Lysara frowned. "Final test." The glowing figure nodded. "The archive will unlock only when the major civilizations choose cooperation over ownership." Murmurs spread across the chamber. The custodian raised a hand. A new display appeared. Thousands of sealed chambers hidden within the archive, each containing knowledge beyond imagination. Advanced medicine, clean energy systems, terraforming technology, scientific discoveries millions of years ahead of current understanding. The future of entire civilizations sat behind those locked doors. But one condition remained: unity. "The choice is yours," the custodian said. Then it vanished. The chamber fell into silence. For the next several days, negotiations continued. Old enemies sat at the same table. Ancient rivalries resurfaced. Generations of distrust threatened to destroy everything. More than once, the talks nearly collapsed. But Ethan refused to give up. He traveled between delegations. He listened. He negotiated. He reminded them what was at stake. Not power, not dominance. A future shared by everyone. Gradually, attitudes began to change. The breakthrough came when two civilizations that had been rivals for nearly 2 centuries agreed to support a shared access agreement. Others followed, one by one, nation by nation, world by world, until finally the impossible happened. The Galactic Alliance reached unanimous agreement. For the first time in its history, every major civilization stood together. The decision was transmitted directly to the stellar gate. Across the station, anticipation filled the air. Ethan stood beside Queen Lysara in the observation chamber. Thousands watched from nearby ships. Millions watched from distant worlds. The gate began to glow. Blue light spread across its immense surface. The portal expanded. Then a voice echoed through the stars. Final evaluation complete. The custodian appeared one last time. Requirement satisfied. The sealed chambers within the archive unlocked simultaneously. The knowledge of the architects was finally released. Cheers erupted throughout the station. Some people cried. Others simply stared in wonder. For the first time in millions of years, the legacy of the architects belonged to a new generation. Months later, the effects were already transforming civilization. Diseases that had plagued worlds for centuries disappeared. Energy shortages became history. Famine vanished from dozens of planets. New star routes connected distant regions of the galaxy. Prosperity spread faster than anyone had imagined. Humanity gained respect unlike ever before. Not because humans had conquered anyone, but because one human had reminded the galaxy of something important. True strength came from unity. On the anniversary of the gate's activation, Queen Lysara addressed the Alliance. Beside her stood Ethan Carter. The former maintenance worker looked uncomfortable beneath the attention. The Queen smiled. History records that over 1,000 brilliant individuals attempted to unlock the Stellar Gate. She paused. And history will also remember that everything changed when one human asked a simple question. The crowd applauded. Beyond the station windows, the Stellar Gate shone brightly against the stars. No longer a monument to failure. Now it was a symbol of possibility. A reminder that the greatest breakthroughs do not always come from the most powerful people. Sometimes they come from the person willing to see the problem differently. For 500 years, 1,000 men had tried and failed. Then one human changed everything. The end. Subscribe my channel.